Thank you, thank you.
Good morning. How's everyone doing today? I don't know how I'm going to follow that energy. I'll have to dig deep. So an endeavor to rekindle is my talk today. And before I get into that and speak about that, I would like to, this past Friday I had the opportunity, like Reverend Bonnie talked about, the last 3.5 months I was wandering around Europe, did some meditation retreats, walked the Camino de Santiago, and got to hang out with friends, and just had a really beautiful journey. But this past Friday I got to go to El Paso to share my experience of traveling with some 6th graders. And one of the things I asked them to do before because this trip I just came back from was a goal and a dream I had had for a while. And so I asked them to write down a goal or a dream that they have in their life. So before I dive in, I just want to share these with you because as I was reading through them, it reminded me that I think we're all deep down 6th graders in adult bodies. When I grow up, I want to become a famous YouTuber so I can make interesting videos. All right? I would like to become a veterinarian and visit Paris, France. I want to sleep all day. To cure bone cancer and Ebola. Be famous or win the lottery. I dream to graduate in the best engineering school so I can become an engineer in the NASA programs. I want to be a phlebotomist because I want to be like my mommy. I want to become a unicorn or a potato. I don't know the connection, but my dream is to have a good family and lots of friends. My goal is to be able to ride a skateboard without falling on the floor. My goal is to make an awesome mark on the world. My dream to be an all-star baseball player and win the Powerball lottery when I'm 25 years old, or be famous on social media and be 6 foot 6 inches when I am 23. I think that's extremely useful for this crowd because we talk about being specific with our visions. So for this young child, this or something better. My goal is to one day become a good photographer. My dream is to become a chef and open my own restaurant. My dream is to become a professional soccer player like Messi and Neymar. And then the little caveat is the one I connected with the most. Also, eat a pizza. Because I love to eat pizza. So I just wanted to share those with you. And I usually like to share a story early on, but I felt like that would lighten the mood. Because I will forewarn you, when you spend a lot of time in meditation and prayer and self-reflection, some dark stuff can come up. And I will be touching on those today. So I wanted to start with a laugh, because that's where I feel the most joy, is when I bring laughter to people's lives. So love as the light reborn in us, an endeavor to rekindle. And so I thought before I really got into this to touch on that idea of love and light, to focus where we're going with this. And so in 1 Corinthians 13:8, it simply says, love never fails. And that has absolutely been my experience, is that love never fails. And in the Science of Mind, it talks about light. The creature shall be delivered from bondage. As the inner light dawns, it delivers the outer light from bondage. This is in line with the teaching that everything is from within out. When the soul knows freedom, the law will free the body, and the outer life will express health, happiness, and success. All things work for our good. Even that which we call evil is salutary, leading us to the way the truth, and the life. Suffering should teach us a lesson which would cause us to refrain from making more mistakes. It carries a blessing with it when we learn how to garner knowledge from experience. So, back in 2011, I was taking a World Religions within the United States class when I was going to school at Arizona State. And during that class, one of the things we had to do was listen to an interview with a man. The man being interviewed, his name was Jean Vanier, or his name is Jean Vanier. And during this interview, the way this man spoke about spirituality and his interactions with religion and his understanding and belief in and around God and the universe it came from such a tender and loving place, and you could tell it was something he had engaged in for many, many years of his life. A little bit about Jean Vanier is he is the founder of a community called L'Arche. And it's basically a communities. It started as one, and it's now in 151 countries and 5 continents around the world. And basically the way he founded it was back in the 60s, he had visited a psychiatric hospital and saw how people with mental disabilities were being treated at the time. And so he bought a house in Paris. The hospital that he had been to was in Paris. And he bought a house in Paris and took 2 of the men from that hospital to live with him in community and to live together as brothers. And it has since expanded and evolved all over the world. So I'm going to just sort of leave that out there for a minute, because the importance of that interview at the time was life-changing for me in the sense that it rekindled that search for spirituality, and that to continue down that path in a more motivated way, in a more engaged way, and because it had really been I'd been on a spiritual path or seeking different spiritual endeavors for about 3 years at that point. And one of the ways that it was explained to me about walking down this path of trying to I think it was spoken about very well in the reading, about shedding those things that are not truly us and really getting back to that love and light that's within us, that's our true self. And so during that, the way it was explained to me is that there'll be a time of growth, and there'll be changes, and there'll be motivation and happiness and joy. And then sometimes those growths can sort of plateau for a while and just sort of mainline and maybe dip down a little bit. And maybe that dip is what again motivates us to grow some more, to do some more self-evaluation, to seek new ways of becoming one with the universe. And that's absolutely been my experience with it. So back in July, I had bought, well, let's rewind even more. Back in April, I had bought a one-way ticket from Boston to Paris. And the next day I went into my boss's office and said, hey, I'm leaving on June 2nd. And, June 2nd. And I would love to help train the next person if you hire them in time and everything like that. And so I was able to train the person that took over my position so that I could go travel the world. I land in Paris on July 31st. I get off the plane. And as everyone I'm sure knows, in France, they speak French. All the signs are in French. All the directions are in French. And this guy up here does not speak any French. So for about the first 30 minutes to an hour after landing, I was terrified. Got into that place of doubt and thought, this is more. I bit off more than I could chew. I got a little grandiose in my goals, and I don't, I'm totally screwed. Luckily, I figured out the bus schedule. I was able to get into downtown Paris, find my hotel. I dumped off my bags, and the first thing I did was what I'm sure anyone in Paris does, is I went and found the Eiffel Tower. And there's a huge park next to the Eiffel Tower, and I sat down under a tree when I was there, and apparently I was tired because I dozed off for about 10 or 15 minutes, and when I woke up, I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was the Eiffel Tower looming over me. And I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be amazing. And sure enough, it was. So part of my time in Europe included a meditation retreat, a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And this wasn't my first time doing a meditation retreat, but it was the first time I was doing it in Europe, and this particular one took place in Switzerland. And on the fourth day of that meditation retreat, I was sitting, there's a big meditation hall for everyone to sit together in silence, and this vision, if you will, this thought crossed my mind. And before I get into this, because I'm doing amazing, I'm doing fine, and this was not reflective of how I felt at the time. But this thought of suicide happening as an adult crossed my mind. And it was very shocking to me because I have not had those thoughts as an adult. I don't know why it came up at that time. So I try to push it away, like, oh, that's not me, like this needs to move on. And I get back into the meditation and it came up again. And so instead of trying to avoid it and ignore it, I just sat with it and allow it to come through. And after this whole vision completed, so to step back just a moment, when I was 15, I did have some suicidal ideations. I did not take any action on those, but it was something I thought about often. And all of those thoughts and feelings from when I was 15 came bubbling up to the surface. And this is something that I thought I had faced and dealt with and confronted long ago, many years ago. And I just started crying. I was sitting there in the meditation hall just crying. And these feelings came up, and it was really an amazing thing, because all of those things that I felt as a 15-year-old, being lost, being confused, and just trying to take responsibility for things that grown-ups were doing that were really none of my business. But as a 15-year-old, it's hard to have that perspective. So I stopped crying, and I get up and dry my tears and go back and sit down in the meditation hall and just start crying again. And this time, it was just this deep sense of love and compassion, because as I was experiencing this, I wasn't experiencing it as myself. I was experiencing it as myself as an adult, having love and compassion for this 15-year-old boy. That wasn't necessarily me, but it was me, right? And it just really opened my heart to a new way of looking at a situation I thought I had dealt with years ago. And I think that was the beginning within this journey in Europe of, because if you would have asked me the day before, well, I guess it's a silent meditation retreat. You couldn't have asked me the day before. If you would have asked me before we went into noble silence, my thoughts and feelings about what I went through when I was 15, I would have said, oh, I've dealt with that. I've done self-reflection on it. I've meditated on it. I've talked to loved ones and spiritual leaders, spiritual mentors about that, and it's long gone. But little did I know, sometimes going into that deep silence and going into that place of peace and safety can bring up things that intellectually I have confronted, but maybe not within my heart. So I finished the meditation retreat, and I go to a little community in France, in the middle of France. And the name of the town is called Taizé, and there's also a community there called Taizé. And what Taizé is it's a ecumenical monastic order with a strong devotion to peace and justice through prayer and meditation. And I spent a week there. And basically the way this, it's a relatively, as monastic orders go, it's a relatively new and young order. It was started in World War II by a gentleman named Brother Roger, who had moved to Switzerland to France because he wanted to find some way to be of service during the Second World War. And so he had spent some time in this town called Taizé and had purchased a house, and during the war was hiding Jewish people because where Taizé was right on the border where Germany had taken control, and south of there was sort of where the Allies still had control within France. And he was forced to leave because people had discovered what was going on there and people being hidden. So he went back to Switzerland until World War II was done. And he came back to Taizé, and this time he opened it. He asked some friends to come help him care for orphans that had been orphaned during the Second World War. And since then, it has evolved and grown to a huge community that, it's a modest-sized community, but people from all over the world go to pray and meditate there every week. Their average number of visitors is in the range of about 2,000 different visitors each week. So I spent a week there, and then I started on the pilgrimage of the Camino de Santiago. For anyone that might not be familiar, it is a pilgrimage across northern Spain. It was originally to walk to Santiago de Compostela, where they believe they have found a tomb of one of the original 12 disciples. And there's some debate whether that's true or not, but it has withstood the time, and people still continue to make pilgrimages there. And in our relatively modern time, people go there for religious reasons still. People go there for spiritual reasons, for self-reflection. Some people just go for the physical exercise, because it's over 500 miles to walk from the border of France and Spain to this town in northwest Spain. And if you're really crazy, you'll walk another 3 days to the coast and walk a total of over 600 miles. So I set out on this pilgrimage, and I literally started off with the 10-day meditation retreat, 7 days of prayer in Taizé, and then I started in on this journey, this pilgrimage, really truly to use this endeavor for self-reflection. And on the third day, and this usually takes people about 30 to 40 days to do. And on the third day, walking from Zubiri, Spain to Pamplona, Spain, I had the most excruciating pain that I've ever experienced in my knee. It was the most excruciating pain that I'd ever experienced that happened to be in my knee. I guess I should say that better. I've never had knee problems. And the entire day I was in pain. I had to walk slower than everyone else that I had been walking with the day before. And every time I lifted my left leg to take a step, there was just a shooting pain from my knee up the rest of my leg. And the kind of pain that kind of makes you delirious and you lose track of time. I would think that I was walking for 15 minutes, and I would look down at my watch, and it would have been an hour. And then I would think I had been walking for an hour and a half, and I looked down, and it had been 30 minutes. It was a very humbling experience. It was a very lonely experience because, like I said, the people that I had been walking with the day before went ahead. And I just had this real feeling of hopelessness during this day. And many of you are probably thinking, well, why didn't you just stop walking? The reason I didn't stop walking that particular day is because in Pamplona, there was a friend that was waiting for me to show up. And I had a place to stay, and I figured that she could help me get some help with my knee. So I continued walking on, thinking the entire time that I'd blown out my knee, that I was going to have to stop my travel 3 days in. That thought that I had back in Paris, that I'd bitten off more than I could chew, came rushing back, that it was now manifesting itself in my knee. And it was just a very scary and fearful day. So I get to Pamplona. My friend is there to welcome me. I explain to her what is going on. She makes an appointment with a physical therapist. I go. Luckily, she was there because I only know a very little amount of Spanish. So she was there to be my interpreter and my translator with the physical therapist, who only knew a very little amount of English. And as soon as she explains what happens, the physical therapist, oh yeah, we see this all the time. It's a very common running thing. You'll have to not walk for a couple days. She gave me some stretches to do. She massaged it out. And I was amazingly blessed. I was stuck in a town where I knew somebody. They were able to help me out. They had an extra bed for me to sleep in for the 2 days, and help me navigate everything I needed to do within those 2 days of resting and getting ready to continue on the trip. And the gift that had taught me, it has continued to teach me since I've gone back, is once again that thought of compassion, and that thought of gratefulness. And up until that point in my life, I had never really thought about being able-bodied and being able to walk wherever I want to walk, do whatever I want to do in ease and comfort. But that day, walking 22 kilometers, which I meant to look up how many miles that was, and I forgot to. It's a lot of miles. Gave me a whole new perspective of those around me. And just earlier this week, I was hanging out with my grandmother, who's 91, and she wasn't walking as fast as I would have liked. But luckily, the very next thought was that day in Spain, walking across Spain, and my being able to just take a breath and to take a step back and allow that compassion to come through for my grandmother, who I can only imagine I know she's in constant pain in her knee, and but she walks with that every day. And so during these two things, these two challenges or struggles, I was able to open my eyes to a bigger picture of love and compassion. And I shared with a few people while I was over there, my trip to Europe, especially when I was going through all of this, was the worst thing I had ever done, and it was the best thing I had ever done, because it had taught me so much. So to rewind just a second, back to Taizé. Well, the week I was in Taizé was during they have an annual gathering for youth around the world. and their specific age ranges is 18 to 35. And basically the way it works is you wake up, you go to morning prayer, which is an amazing experience to sing, because their service, their prayer time is very different than what you might think of a typical Christian service. They sing and chant for about 15 or 20 minutes. There's about 15 minutes of just complete silence, and then 15 more minutes of singing and chanting and prayer. And to do that with 2,000 people is quite amazing, especially during the silence part. You never could imagine that 2,000 people could be silent together in a huge building, but it is possible. So you go to morning prayer, you go to breakfast, and then they have workshops. And then lunch, more prayer, more workshops, and then dinner and evening prayer. And one of the guest lecturers that were doing a number of the workshops was Jean Vanier, the gentleman I told you about during the interview I had heard with him. And so for the first couple of days during the workshops that he was sharing, I saw some other ones that looked more interesting to things. And these workshops ranged from anywhere from people helping refugees in Germany to be able to locate there and assimilate to the culture, and to find a way to live within the means of their culture in Germany. People going to Africa and Iraq to help set up wells for clean drinking water. There was a choir from Burma that came and sang for us and shared some of the challenges that is currently going on in Burma. And so from all over the world, people were gathering there to just bring awareness to different things of love and light that were going on within the world. Well, Thursday was the last day of workshops, or the last day Jean Vanier was going to be doing a workshop. And so I decided, well, this is my opportunity. I'll go hear him speak in real life. And as I'm walking to the classroom that it was in, I come around the corner, and Jean Vanier and a woman that was helping him walk were walking towards the classroom, and there was no one else around. It was just them two walking, and I was walking by myself. And so my first thought was like, oh, I should go say hello and thank him for the inspiration he had given me 6 years prior. And then I was like, well, no, he doesn't want to be bothered. I'm sure he gets that all the time. But something deeper in me said, I'll approach him and thank him. And so I approached him and thanked him for the interview that he had done for this particular program. And he grabbed my hand, and he just engaged me in conversation. And he started reminiscing about the person that had interviewed him and what a pleasant interview it was. And he's I don't know how old he is, but he's getting up in age. And the woman he was with was holding his arm, and he grabbed my arm to steady himself, and we continued to walk. And that same loving presence, that same tenderness, the same engaged person that I heard on that interview, we were holding on to each other as we walked to the classroom where he was going to be presenting with two other people. And so when we set out on an endeavor, I read some of the dreams and goals that the sixth graders have. And I'm sure each and every person in here has dreams and goals that they hold in their heart and they hold dear, even if we don't say them out loud. We still sometimes have those goals and dreams that are near and dear to just us. When we decide to pursue those things and take that first step into the journey to follow that. It's easy to think that it's going to be all good and very easy and no challenges will come up and no struggles. Because that's, at the end of the day, that's really what I want. I want to be comfortable. But to really allow that light within us to be reborn and to burn bright and to continue to burn bright, sometimes those things that pop up, whether it's an emotional thing at a meditation retreat or a physical manifestation of severe pain in our bodies, sometimes those are the things that make us take a step back, reevaluate, listen to what's going on emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. Walk past that challenge. And we think it's taking away from reaching our goal and our dreams, but really it's just adding to the goal and the dream. And so what I can tell you today is that light within us that Marianne Williamson talks about, it never goes out. I can really truly stand in front of you all today and say it's burning brighter in me today, that light, than I've ever experienced in my life. But I had to go through some of those challenges and some of those low points in order to be here today to share this magnificent story with you. And it was just beautiful, it coming full circle from 2011 when I heard an interview with a man I thought I would never interact with. 6 years later, holding his hand, walking with him, thanking him with a very open and grateful heart for what he had, unbeknownst to him, had impacted my life. And through that interaction and seeing who he truly was and seeing the light that was burning in him that had been the love and the light within him that he had cultivated through the many endeavors that during his life, I was able to see that and allow it to mirror within me. So I'm very grateful for you all being here today, and I'm grateful to have been able to share that story with you. Thank you.